Lesson number 3, pivot points. Hi, I'm Stratman. I'm the software programmer for pipware.com, and today I'm going to try and explain a bit about how pivot points are calculated and how useful they are for your trading. Unfortunately, pivot points can be quite confusing when you come to apply them, because there are so many different methods for calculating them out there. Some of the methods that come to mind are Fibonacci, daily pivots, Caramella, Woody's pivots. There's a whole host of them. What we need to do is determine what's the most applicable calculation for our particular style of trading. So your style might be different to mine, so I'm going to go over a few of these different types of pivot point calculations so you can see what the differences are and how we might apply them. Okay, for a start, pivot points are typically calculated based on a previous candle for a time period. Typically the daily time frame, which is what this is, or the weekly, or the monthly. And the way it works is that if I go back to the daily time frame, the way it works is that we want to get a heads up on what might be support and resistance points for today. This is today's candle, this is yesterday's candle, and we're going to try and get that information based on the previous day's candle. Now the reason these pivot points work so well is, I guess, that it's such a well-known thing within the Forex community that it's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy. So people calculate their pivot points, they work based on them during the current day's session, and price action tends to operate based on what has been calculated. Therefore people start using it more and more, and hello, it kind of just ends up that the pivot points is a self-fulfilling prophecy, like I said. What do we need to calculate the pivot points that we're going to use for the next day? Well, for today we're going to need to know detail about yesterday. If you hover over the close of a candle on MetaTrader, you'll get all the information about that particular candle. So this candle's open, high, low and close we can use to calculate pivot points for today's session. The traditional method for just daily pivots is based around the close and the open and high. And if I switch over to another screen here, there's some brokers will actually provide you what they think the current pivot points are. These pivot points are based on a day starting at midnight GMT 0 and finishing at midnight GMT 0. So they would take the close, the low and the high. So here's the high, the low and the close. They'd add all those values together of the previous day's price action and divide it by 3 and get a figure for the pivot, and then they'd go and place it down here. So obviously they do this every day automatically and provide a table for it. And then there's a value for support 1 and resistance 1, which is very important points, and they're calculated by, once you know the pivot value, you grab the pivot value, multiply it by 2 and subtract the low, and the support is exactly the same except for you subtract the high. This particular website gives you the ability to take your own platform's values and place them into these boxes here and calculate out what yours are. I'm going to do that based on, like I said, I'm hovering over this yesterday's candle, and I'm going to punch those values of high, low and close and get my answer. I'll do that off screen so that it's quick. Okay, I've got the values in there, and what I expect is, because my broker time zone, my daily candles start at GMT 0 and finish on GMT 0, so midnight to midnight, I expect my values to come out pretty much the same for today's pivots for Euro USD. So we hit the send button, we've got some values come up here, so let's check the daily pivot, 4382, down here the pivot is 438. We're pretty damn close. You've got to remember that my price feed from my MetaTrader broker will be a little bit different than the price feed for this broker here, so there will be slight differences. Let's just check the R1 point, 1.4429, 1.4426. Look, we're just so damn close, but you just have to take that into account, that you will get slight discrepancies based on the price feed that you have from your particular broker. Also, your broker might have a different GMT time zone. So your daily candle might not start at GMT 0, so you might have to make an adjustment for that, but if you calculated by putting the values in here, you'd be fine. Okay, so we've got our values. Now we kind of need to display them on the chart, and so to do that, what I like to do is use off the THV thread on Forex Factory. I've got Trader at Home. He has done a post and he's made some changes to this wonderful pivot indicator that we use on Forex Factory for the THV thread, that is, for trading. And this one here I'll just add to my chart. I've just downloaded it. Let's just have a quick look at what that looks like. So basically we're using the day formula, and if I switch down to H1, what we get to see is, yes, the 1.4382 has been calculated as my daily pivot based on the previous candle. I'm just going to zoom out a bit so that you can see a few more candles, because I've just gone down to the 1 hour time frame, and obviously one full day. This is the start of the first. That's 22, there's 23, there's the 00. So there's the start of the day. So this low here and this high up here and the close of the day, which would have been here, is what's been used to calculate this pivot. And then we've got the resistance 1 and S1 calculated as well. Now, what use are these points? Well, I can tell you that if you go back to the very start of when the euro came into existence, which is quite a number of years now, almost 10 years, that if you calculated the daily pivot values S1 and R1 for the next day from the previous day, and you did that the next day and looked at this current day, so on and so on and so on, it has absolutely been proven that on average, if you took the average values over that whole time, that the day high for the current day typically will be within 1 pip of these two values. So that's quite interesting. Like, it's not a guarantee that that's going to happen today, but what I'm saying is that on average, if you took it over years and years, that the average actually ends up being within 1 pip of R1 and S1. So they are very significant support and resistance points that we need to be aware of. Okay, so that being said, if we look at a daily candle then, so based on this daily candle, today could potentially be a larger day because we take into account the high and the low and the close. So that's how daily pivots are calculated, the traditional sense. Now if we drag this down, we get the D, the R2 and the R3. These become quite important points as well. Now that's why we use them. They are just respected by traders all over the world. And typically another point to note is that if the price opens above the daily pivot on one chart, the movement for the day is considered to normally be long. If the price opens below the daily pivot, the movement for the day is considered to be short. So there's some other points of view that are there as well. Now we need to just very quickly look at the possibility of the other types, like Fibonacci pivots. If you just hold on a sec, I'll just get set up. So I've just gone back to the site, and now we're calculating them as Fibonacci pivot points. And as you can see, the pivot point calculation is exactly the same, the high plus the low plus the close divided by 3, but the values for R1, R2 and R3 are based on Fibonacci numbers, which are the 38.2, 61.8% and the 100%. So if I calculate those out, these are the values we get. And if we go back to our chart and we change our indicator, we can decide whether we're going to be using the day formula or Fibonacci formula. I've changed it to false to use the Fibonacci formula, and I'm going to go back down to H1, and there we go, there's the Fibonacci pivots shown. So the daily pivot is exactly the same, but the resistance 1, resistance 2 and resistance 3 are calculated by Fibonacci numbers instead. So there we go, there's our lesson on daily pivots and how they're calculated. Just be mindful that most people at the moment are calculating their pivots on daily candles that start at midnight GMT to midnight GMT the next day, and we use the open the close, the high and the low of the previous day to calculate some possible support and resistance points. Okay, it's Stratman from pipware.com.